Please subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so that whenever we release a video at the Jamaica Young Police Channel, you'll be the first to receive the same. Remember to share the video with your friend, your mama, papa, girlfriend, boyfriend, and your side chick and side man. Yes, and post a comment below, even just to post and say, I am here to show your appreciation of the work that we are doing here at the Jamaica Young Police Channel. And thanks for being a part of the movement. So, moving on. We at the Jamaica Young Police Channel, we hate criminals with a passion. So here's one of them. This guy name is Javon Pinnock. Yeah, aka Froggy. Have a distinct scar on the left side of his face, and him eye go all the way down to him cheekbone. And you know, more or less is a Jamaican do that, you know, telephone cut. I don't know how them come by that thing for, you know, to scar people face like that, and that it's just awful, but terrible people. So this man that you're looking at, his name is Javon Pinnock, aka Froggy. Yeah, Froggy them call him on the street, and he's wanted in New York, in Queens, New York, for the murder of Javon Jamison, a Jamaican youth them called Blingers. Yes, and Blingers was killed almost 2 years ago by this man and another man named Christopher King. Christopher King is in custody in New York, awaiting trial for the murder of Jamison. So we are appealing, we are begging, beseeching you Jamaican people in Jamaica and the diaspora, wherever you see this man, to inform the police, whether it's 119 or 911, and let them know that this man is wanted in New York for the murder of Javon Jamison, so that this man can be placed in custody or go straight to the departure home where he belongs, and that's justice. And we say that because we hate criminals with a passion, because there was no reason for this man to kill Blingers, because Blingers was not a threat to him at the time. It was murder, clear murder. Yes, welcome to the Jamaica Young Police Channel. To our loyal viewers, subscribers and Patreon member. At the channel, we are a group of law-abiding citizens who believe in the rule of law and respect the rights of every citizen, but not the ones who do not subscribe to such behavior. We do believe in and support preemptive strikes because they save lives. This is a logical conclusion because preemptive strikes save lives and prevent the further loss of lives. We are all about saving lives at this channel. We at the channel aid criminals with a passion and do not want them over here. We do not want your views, your subscriptions, your likes or your comments. Please go elsewhere where the red carpet is waiting for you. Over here, we want you to go to prison or the departure lounge at Madden. Moving on to today's video. So you're looking at a man, you know, his name is Elon Musk, and you would have seen when at the Trump inauguration where he gave the world the Nazi salute. That Nazi salute wasn't an accident. That is something that embedded in his blood, and to show you that these people, although they are racist and evil at its core, they don't understand that Nazism, although it flourished for a couple of years, but eventually they lost. So now they are trying to revive it, and they try to revive it in America, but eventually they will lose it also, because you have to understand that evil might look like it's winning for a while, but eventually good always take over. Remember, black people and a whole, when they come on to evil, terrorism and all kind of things, black people have endured all of these things. We should not be here as a people, but we have survived. We survive all the atrocities and all of the wickedness of these people, and they are still at it. Right now in America, they are trying everything. Yeah, Elon Musk, Donald Trump and the likes. And we'd say, say to them, if you hate black people that much, because black people, of all the things that they have done to black people, all black people want to be just left alone and live them life, but they can't seem to stop thinking about black people and hating them and want to erase even history of their evil that they have done to the world. So right now, Elon Musk, that his company, Elon Musk is not a genius, don't be stupid or anything like that to think that Elon Musk is a genius. Elon Musk haven't invented anything. nothing. So he's not a genius. So when people put him as a genius, you have to understand that most people who get rich, you get rich on the back of others. And Elon Musk, as an immigrant, got rich in America at the backs of the American taxpayers. Then he turned around, use the same government now to attack the American people. White, predominantly white people. So we'd encourage people that there are a few channels. When it comes on to news, Democracy Now! Is one of the YouTube channel that we watch predominantly. NPR on PBS. NPR, that's where you get real solid news, unbiased. I tell you, just real mama papa truth. But you know that if you watch Fox News, you're not getting any news. All you're getting is propaganda. Fox News is owned by an immigrant, and Elon Musk is an immigrant. None of these people are Americans by birth. So these people, they have all intention of not only dividing America, but destroying America from within. But you have to understand that education is paramount. When somebody can't think, then you can control their thought process. And that is what the Republican Party has done to these people. They don't care, they don't love their people. And I'm like, man, these people are the epitome of evil. So we are going to let you watch, this documentary of Elon Musk past, where he's coming from, and that's the person that we're seeing right now in the public domain, spewing his racism and hatred towards black people in America and worldwide. Everything that this current administration is doing, Donald Trump, it is nothing strange. Black people who knew him from back then told you that he was racist, but you have some black people who have low self-esteem and they love the oppressor. And that is what happened in this case. With some of them, you will see them at the White House and they're grinning their teeth and we're at the White House and all of these things. And the next day, Donald Trump did was to fire the Joint Chief of Staff. So they think that they are winning right now, and they're trying everything because they want to control people's life. And they want people to live in fear. But you have to understand, fear is imaginary. They only can kill you once. Remember, millions of people die in this country for this land. The Indians, they wipe them out. Yeah, white Americans wipe them out. So you have to understand, and the reason why they go on to get rid of Department of Education is that they want to erase the history of their terrorism and wickedness that they have done to black people. But they can try to hide it from their people, but that won't hide in the black community. So we're going to let you watch this documentary. This man, his name is Chris Greal, and he's telling you about Elon Musk and where he's coming from, and his mother and father. Elon Musk is a Nazi at heart. He's evil. And anyone who supports Elon Musk, you have to be a racist person. You understand? And you're going to learn some things. We had known long before that this man was the epitome of evil. At no time in my life I had ever even think of even buying a Tesla vehicle, because whenever you're doing business, you're spending your money, you must always look up the owner of the business and where they're coming from. Elon must play a well scripted game and scam the liberals in California with Tesla. Now he's moved right to the heartlands of racism, Texas. If you look in America, the poorest states in America is predominantly white people live there. So that goes to show you the level of thinking. These people, not only that they are uneducated, but they are super illiterate. Because to show you how illiterate these people are, these are the same people that they would vote in our election. They would put to increase the minimum wage, and the candidate who is against the minimum wage, they would vote for the minimum wage, and they would vote for the candidate who is against the minimum wage. So that makes sense, to show you that these people are real. Not only dummies, but racism is everything to them. And trust me, they are the one that suffer the most in America. The red states, the poorest states in the union. if the blue states, the so-called blue states like New York, California, and all of these places, although they have the madness too, if they are to ever stop paying taxes to the federal government, all of these people in these states would start eating each other because they can't sustain themselves. So I want you to watch this documentary with Elon Musk about giving you expose about this evil man. He's the epitome of evil. And evil, when it comes down to evil, the only thing that's good for evil is for evil to go to where they're supposed to meet with the devil. They're not supposed to be amongst us. But they think that they're powerful because they have powers on earth and because they have money. But they don't know that money is only of this world. You only can kill you once. Fear is imaginary. So you watch, you listen, and you decide. Elon Musk, history, rights at the fingertip.
.org. I'm Amy Goodman. We end today's show with part 2 of my recent interview with the reporter Chris McGreal, who was the Johannesburg correspondent for The Guardian during the last years of apartheid through 2002. He's been closely following the South African-born billionaire Elon Musk, who was born in 1971 in Johannesburg, South Africa, and raised under the country's racist apartheid laws. Some of McGreal's pieces include what does Elon Musk believe and how the roots of the PayPal mafia extend to apartheid South Africa. I began by asking Chris McGreal to discuss Musk's grandfather, Joshua Haldeman.
We see Musk's grandfather, Joshua Haldeman. He immigrates to South Africa in 1950, and that's really when apartheid's just starting to kick in. The 1950s are when the first laws, South Africa had discriminatory laws before, but you see the specific apartheid laws, which are much more aggressive, and in many ways reminiscent of the Nazi Nuremberg laws against Jews in the 1930s. They have very similar echoes in stripping black people from the right to work in certain places, their movements, controlling them, confining them to areas. You already had a situation which is now, come to the fore because of recent events with Trump. But
you mean with Elon Musk giving the Nazi salute?
Yes, but also with the sanctions over land, is that the 1913 Land Act had already deprived most black people of land in South Africa anyway. At that point, the 7% or 10% as it was of the population that was white owned more than 85% of the land under the Land Act of 1913. So the apartheid laws kick in the 1950s. Elon Musk was born in 1971 in Johannesburg, and at that point the Prime Minister was a guy called John Vorster. And John Vorster's background is very telling, really, because Vorster in the 1930s had been a member of a neo-Nazi militia called the OB, which was openly sympathetic and linked to the Nazis in Germany. It was responsible for all kinds of attacks, but including burning Jews out of their businesses in Johannesburg.
And we're talking about what years?
In the 1930s, so the late 1930s. And then South Africa goes to war as an ally of Britain against Hitler. The OB and the groups that support them, like Vorster, people like Vorster, they actively oppose that. They actually are in touch with, OB is in touch with German military intelligence, and they plan to assassinate the Prime Minister of South Africa, Jan Smuts, and overthrow the government and have it support Hitler. That plan fails because the Germans are unable to provide the necessary weapons and back out. But in 1942, John Vorster, later Prime Minister, stands up and gives a speech, and he talks about the system that their kind of ideological belief system, which was Christian nationalism. And he says, Christian nationalism in South Africa is the same as Nazism in Germany and fascism in Italy. It's all anti-democratic. It's all the same thing. By 1971, when Elon Musk is born, that man is the Prime Minister of South Africa. And Christian nationalism is the basis of not only the political philosophy, but the entire education system that Elon Musk is brought up into.
So take us from Elon Musk's grandfather moving to South Africa in the 50s to his father, how they gained their wealth.
So Musk Elon Musk's grandfather moves there in the 1950s. He's not particularly prosperous. He arrives without a lot of money, but it's Elon Musk's father, Errol, who makes the real money, principally through investments in emerald mines in Zambia. And, mining conditions in southern Africa in that period were really pretty dire in the 1960s and 70s. Very high death rate, very poor conditions, but the owners got very rich. And Musk lived what can only be described as a neo-colonial life. If you were white South African in that period and you had any money at all, you lived with servants at your beck and call, you lived in sprawling housing, and what you see with Errol Musk is that when we get a glimpse into just how much money he had when he and Elon's mother get divorced, she says at the time that, well, he owns a yacht, he owns a jet, he owns several houses, so there was considerable wealth there.
Was the grandfather of Elon Musk on the record in his support for Forster?
Well, he was certainly on the record in his support for apartheid, very vividly so, yes. And he said that that's why he'd moved to South Africa from Canada in 1940 was in support of it. Now, the grandfather himself is killed a few years later in a plane crash, but it's not known what Elon Musk's grandmother's personal views of Forster particularly were, but they were both avid supporters of the apartheid system, and the grandmother lived for a number of years afterwards.
So you've been talking about Elon Musk's maternal grandparents and how they moved to South Africa, but talk about their roots in Canada.
Originally, the grandparents have no connection to South Africa. They're born and grew up in Canada. And in the 1930s, the grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, he's head of the Canadian branch of a US movement called Technocracy Incorporated. And Technocracy Incorporated is essentially a movement to overthrow democratic government in the United States and have technocrats, but big businessmen in many ways, come in and run the country. That's partly a reaction to FDR's election and New Deal and massive reforms that he's introduced in the United States.
So from Canada, they would help to launch a coup against FDR?
No, Canada had its own branch of this movement to overthrow the government in Canada. Haldeman heads that branch. And through the 1930s, it takes on increasingly fascist overtones. They start wearing grey uniforms, modelled on the Nazi brown and black shirts. And so when Canada declares war on Germany in 1939 alongside Britain, the movement is banned because it's clearly sympathetic to Hitler. Then Haldeman is arrested.
Elon Musk's grandfather.
Elon Musk's grandfather is arrested. They find documents sympathetic to the Nazis and other subversive documents inside his house, and he is sent to prison for a few months and then remains on essentially a subversion watch list for the rest of the war. Yeah, so he's basically regarded as a Nazi sympathizer, a fellow traveller.
And about a decade later, he moves to South Africa. Why?
So after the war, he founds another political movement which has deep anti-Semitic roots and actually promotes the forgery, the protocols of the
Elders of Zion.
Elders of Zion, that's it. But obviously after the war and the Holocaust, there's no real appetite for that in Canada. It's a failing political movement. And so his eye casts down to South Africa. By 1950, the apartheid government has been in power for 2 years. And Haldeman looks at it and thinks that's just my kind of place, which clearly that was what he would want to create in Canada and had been trying to create in the 1930s. And so that's the point at which he and his wife, May, they move to South Africa and become very fervent supporters of apartheid.
Now, I wanted to blend in some breaking news in addition to cutting off all aid to South Africa, news of the region, and that is Sam Nujoma, the freedom fighter turned president who led Namibia to independence from apartheid South Africa in 1990, has died at the age of 95, often referred to as Namibia's founding father, known for his motto, a united people striving to achieve a common good for all members of the society will always emerge victorious. states, used to be called Southwest Africa, became the independent Namibia. Talk about Sam Nujoma and how that fits into this picture of South Africa through apartheid.
So Sam Nujoma was the head of the Southwest Africa People's Organization, which was the liberation movement of Namibia. SWAPO, indeed. Really, SWAPO takes off and is able to have effect after Angola becomes independent with the fall of the Portuguese dictatorship. The Portuguese colonizers leave Angola, and Angola provides a base then for SWAPO to really fight to liberate Southwest Africa. That becomes known as the Border War. Euphemistically, the South Africans call it the Border War. They actually invade Angola in an attempt to overthrow the Marxist-leaning government of Angola, but also to keep SWAPO at bay. But the war goes on, and eventually South Africa loses that war. At that period, though, one of the things you see is that Peter Thiel, another member of the PayPal mafia, very close friend of Musk, he had been at school in Johannesburg, but his father gets a job on a uranium mine near Swakopmund in what is then Southwest Africa. And so Peter Thiel moves there as a child and goes to school there. And the thing to know about Southwest Africa, the reason it was separate from South Africa, is that it had been a German colony until the end of the First World War. Then it becomes falls under South Africa's mandate, partly because at that point South Africa was a British colony. When South Africa becomes a republic in the 60s, it hangs on to Southwest Africa and it becomes a South African colony. But the population, big part of the population was of German ancestry, and you could, I remember going to Windhoek in the early 90s, and the main thoroughfare through Windhoek was called Hermann Goringstrasse, named not after the Luftwaffe chief, but after his father, who had been a governor of German Southwest Africa. In Swakopmund, it was even more extreme. It was notorious for many, many years, really into the 80s and 90s, as a hotbed of open support, continued support for the Nazis and for Hitler. The New York Times has a story from the mid-70s of a reporter pulling up at a gas station. It hangs on to Southwest Africa and it becomes a South African colony. But the population, big part of the population was of German ancestry, and you could, I remember going to Windhoek in the early 90s, and the main thoroughfare through Windhoek was called Hermann Goringstrasse, named not after the Luftwaffe chief, but after his father, who had been a governor of German Southwest Africa. In Swakopmund, it was even more extreme. It was notorious for many, many years, really into the 80s and 90s, as a hotbed of open support, continued support for the Nazis and for Hitler. The New York Times has a story from the mid-70s of a reporter pulling up at a gas station to get his car filled with gas, and the attendant openly giving a Nazi salute and saying Heil Hitler to him. You could go to curio shops in Swakopmund and they would sell Nazi-themed mugs and flags and things, and they openly celebrated Hitler's birthday every May. Thiel went to a German school there, so that's the atmosphere he grows up in. His father is an official on a uranium mine there, and the interesting thing about the uranium mine, amongst many other things, is that it supplied part of the uranium to develop the South African atomic bombs in the 1970s, which were developed in league with Israel. Now, part of the deal with Israel was that South Africa would deliver yellow cake uranium to Israel. We don't know where the yellow cake came from. It may have come from that Swakopmund area mine, or it may have come from somewhere else in South Africa. But South Africa was shipping yellow cake to Israel at the same time, because it too was developing nuclear weapons.
And talk about what Peter Thiel has said about all this. You know, I remember as we cover conventions for decades now, Peter Thiel standing up at the first Republican convention that nominated President Trump and, you know, supporting him and who he is.
So Peter Thiel has said of his time in Swakopmund, and particularly the school, which he describes as particularly a brutal education, that it turned him against government and into a libertarian. And I think that's interesting element in all of this is that one of the things that isn't necessarily appreciated outside of South Africa is that there's two kinds of whites there. There's the Afrikaners who we've been talking about, but there's a big English-speaking white population. And one of the aspects of the English-speaking population was they, on paper, said they opposed apartheid, but they gained all of its benefits. And most of them, certainly not all, there were some really heroic individuals, but most of them did very little to actually end apartheid. But one of the products of that is you have people like Musk and Thiel who have done very well and whose parents did very well out of the apartheid system, who deny responsibility for it. They blame it on the Afrikaners, they blame it on a government, extreme right-wing government. But then they have to explain how it is that their own parents were so able to do so well out of apartheid, and then they put that down to individual talent, that they're naturally gifted, and that leads them down this whole libertarian path, anti-government path, because essentially they have to explain how they too were benefits of apartheid without taking responsibility.
And talk about their relationship, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk.
Well, they're co-founders of PayPal together. They both essentially share the same kind of worldview from what I can make out. They're libertarians. They're very opposed to any kind of DEI. You've seen their deep hostility to DEI. I think Thiel buys into the same message about anti-white, the war on white people in South Africa that South African white groups like AfriForum have been pushing in the United States. So I think that philosophically they're very similar, and obviously they have a very close relationship.
And then talk about David Sacks, and talk more specifically about what you're referring to as the PayPal mafia. I don't think most people in this country understand all of these connections and this unusual situation where these, some of the wealthiest men in the world worked together, founded PayPal, and now surround the President of the United States.
Yes, so David Sacks was born in Cape Town in the 70s, and he moves, his parents take him to Tennessee when he's 5 years old, so he didn't grow up in the same milieu as Musk and Thiel, but he did grow up in the white South African diaspora, for sure. He clearly shares the same views. As you say, they're part of the PayPal mafia. They all get rich from the creation of this company. They're all at the top running it. And now Sacks has emerged as Trump's AI and crypto czar. Again, part of the same project. So you can see this.
And he was a chief fundraiser for President Trump, as you said, born in Cape Town.
Yes, a big. So they've all emerged with essentially, from what I can make out, the same philosophy. And of course, that's only been reinforced by their success. They're convinced, obviously, of their own genius and worth, and that government, whether it's South African government or in this case it seems to be the US government, is an obstacle to success.
And then we talked about it in part one, finally Roloff Botha, making this little quartet, white men of a certain age together, and his history also a part of the PayPal mafia.
Yes, he's part of it, and he has not emerged as a open supporter of Trump. I'm not entirely sure what his personal views are on this, but he does have a very interesting background. His grandfather was Pik Botha, who was the last foreign minister of apartheid South Africa, and Pik Botha's job essentially was to go around the world, particularly the West, and assure them that apartheid was being amended, was being dismantled, when in fact it was in many ways, although what was known as petty apartheid, which was the routine discriminations, the segregation, was being dismantled. In fact, the political system was actually only reinforcing it, solidifying it. The government of the time cooked up a system of 3 parliaments that would represent different parts of the population, but and give some people who weren't white a vote, but none of those people were black. There was no black parliament, partly because they were being pushed into the independent homelands. The idea was that they were no longer South African anyway. So Pik Botha went around trying to apologise and excuse for this system, and he was successful with conservatives. He saw a lot of Reagan and people, they loved him here, and the same with Thatcher in Britain. They saw him as the acceptable face of apartheid. And he was so deluded by the end, he was convinced. I remember meeting him during the era of the transition to democracy from apartheid. He was so convinced that he was indispensable to the system that Mandela would have to appoint him foreign minister, which he duly did not.
Would you say the background of all these men's families was fleeing Mandela's South Africa?
Well, some of them left before. I mean, it's worth noting that Elon Musk left in 1988 at the age of 18, just as he would have become eligible to be drafted into the South African army, as all white males were at that point, which might have led him to fight the border war that I was talking about in Angola against SWAPO, or it might have led him into the townships, which at that point were in complete ferment. And you had a huge amount of civil unrest in South Africa at that point. The country had largely become ungovernable. It was under a state of emergency, and the white troops were trying to keep some form of order in the black townships like Soweto. He left before he had to do any of that.
So very interestingly, for people who aren't aware, Elon Musk had a company called X.com. It was an online bank. It merged with Confinity in 2000 to form PayPal. The merged company was renamed PayPal in 2001. And you have all of these guys who you've just laid out. Well, I think Botha is a partner at Sequoia Capital. But now key players. And that brings us to Trump's order on Friday to cut off all aid to South Africa and offer refugee status in the United States to the white South Africans who are, quote, victims of unjust racial discrimination. But interestingly, many in the right-wing white lobby say they want to stay and focus on ending black majority rule. This is Flip Bass, the chairperson of what's called the Solidarity Union.
We may disagree with the ANC, but we love the country. As in any community, there are individuals who wish to immigrate, but the repatriation of Afrikaners as refugees is not a solution for us. We want to build a future in South Africa.
So he is speaking in front of a sign that says AfriForum. Put this in context, and what about Afrikaners saying, no, this is our land, we don't want to come to the United States?
Well, AfriForum is backpedaling furiously now because there's been a huge backlash in South Africa from people who blame it for this situation. In fact, some people have accused it of treason. But if you look at what AfriForum was saying just a decade ago, and certainly in 2018, when people like Kali Kriel, who was head of the AfriForum, and others were coming to the United States, they were claiming there was a white genocide, they were claiming there was a war on white people in South Africa, and they were essentially trying to characterize the post-apartheid era of one of oppression of Afrikaners, that they were the true victims of it. And this is they're not alone in this. There had been a phenomenon ever since the end of apartheid of Afrikaners painting themselves as victims. There was a song emerged in the 1990s called De La Rey. It was very popular with Afrikaners. It was sung in bars and rugby matches. And De La Rey was a famous general who fought to the bitter end against the British in the Boer War, the Second Boer War, in the early 20th century, which the Afrikaners then lost. And this song essentially is an attempt to take Afrikaners back to a time when they were the victims, when it was their women and children dying in the British concentration camp, when they were the people who were oppressed. And it conjures up this Boer general who, he may be losing the war, but he's going to fight to the last, a bitter ender. And this is how they've been characterizing themselves, some of them. And AfriForum is part of that kind of attempt to rewrite history and make out that they're this minority that has long been persecuted, not just by the post-apartheid era, but by the British, and they have a long history. And apartheid was just a means of survival. All they were trying to do was to keep themselves and their culture alive. It has had one other effect which they hadn't expected and has alarmed them, is that in all the orders that have been given out cancelling aid and agreements, one of them affects agricultural products being imported to the United States, which have generally been duty-free as a means of helping Africa. One result is that their own products are no longer being imported duty-free into the United States. So these white South African farmers who've been complaining of oppression will now actually be being hit with tariffs or regular duties, and so it's going to cost them financially, which is one of the reasons they're so upset by it and pretending that it was nothing to do with them.
Guardian reporter Chris McGreal. He was the Johannesburg correspondent for The Guardian during the last years of apartheid through 2002. We did this interview in early February. Over the past 2 months, Trump has suspended aid to South Africa, expelled the South African ambassador, and offered refugee status to white South Africans, claiming South Africa's discriminating against the white minority. Trump has also just nominated Leo Brent Bozell to be U.S. ambassador in South Africa. Bozel's son was sentenced to nearly 4 years in prison for his role in the January 6th insurrection before he was pardoned by President Trump. One note on Elon Musk's family: May Musk is Elon's mother, not his grandmother.
So don't be fooled, what you have heard, this man delivered an unfiltered, no all bars account of Elon Musk family history. Raw, unapologetic, and unlike anything you have heard before. This isn't the sanitized version served up by mainstream media or PR teams. This is the truth laid bare, straight from the source. There was a time when our local television stations, true bastions of investigative journalism, weren't afraid to dig deep and expose the dark legacies of powerful, controversial figures like Elon Musk. They held the line, shining a light on the shadows where men of influence try to hide their misdeeds. But those days are long gone. The watchdog role of local media has been eroded, silenced, or corrupt, and it has been co-opted. Today, that mantle has been picked up by independent platforms like Democracy Now! And NPR, who still dare to question, still dare to investigate, and still dare to speak truth to power. They are doing the work that once defined journalism, exposing wickedness, cloaking wealth and ambition. Let us not forget, evil prevails when good people remain silent. The silence is a weapon, and complicity wear many masks. So when a voice rises to reveal the truth, the hidden truth, listen closely, because in times like these, truth is evolution. So let's be absolutely clear. Any black person, any black person, any black person, or any human being, or brown person, or human being regardless of race, who chooses to purchase a Tesla vehicle, is, whether knowingly or unknowingly, aligning themselves with a legacy steeped in racism, exploitation, and deliberate suppression of progress for marginalized communities across the globe. Elon Musk is the epitome of evil, the dark forces in this world. That man represents everything that is evil towards every race of people. Exploitation, greed. As them said, Doge mean? Doge. Destructive, oligarch, greed, evolutionary. So this is not a statement rooted in emotion. It is grounded in reality, history, and accountability. When you support a company led by Elon Musk, a man whose family wealth has built apartheid South Africa, a regime founded on the brutal oppression of black people, you are not just buying a car, you are endorsing a system that has profited from the suffering of others and continue to disregard the value of equity and justice. Tesla, and by extension Elon Musk, has a documented history of racial discrimination allegations within its factories, reports of unsafe working conditions, and a clear disregard for social progress that protects workers and defends human dignity. By pouring your hard-earned money into his brand, you are contributing to a cycle that marginalizes those already fighting uphill battles for recognition, respect, and equality. And let us be very clear about this platform. This is not an entertainment channel. We are not here to placate, distract, or amuse. We are here to awaken, to challenge, and to empower. This challenge, we take it on because we believe in the truth. How many times can they kill us? If you are thinking about preserving your life because you want to stay silent, you're a damn coward and you're a fool. Remember, millions died before you the same freedom that you're experiencing right now. There is a freedom, whether you're black, brown, Asian, Indian, even white people. Remember, white people die in America for black people to have rights. Because you have to understand the original and the real terrorists. This is the headquarters for them. Europe, that's a birthplace. And this is the headquarters for them right now in 2025. So we are not afraid. This channel exists to ignite change within you, to arm you with the knowledge, insight, and truth, so that you can rise, evolve, and become a stronger, more conscious individual. We will not remain silent while system of power and privilege continue to suffocate the lives of voiceless. We will not pretend that neutrality is an option. This is about standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. So if you truly believe in justice, if you believe in progress for black people, brown people, and all oppressed communities, then it's time to rethink where your money goes and what it says about your values. Black people, it's time to show some real self-esteem. Don't bow or cowtail to racist people like Elon Musk and the likes. Those who have supported them in the past, now it's time for you to rethink about yourself and what you want to do. If you want to contribute to the betterment of humanity, you want to be a proponent for the truth, rights, and equal justice, then that's what it's supposed to be. Remember, when good people remain silent, evil man reigns. Have yourself a beautiful day. Jamaica Young Police Channel out.